Welcome back to Simbright Fashion Academy YouTube channel for another interesting tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to sew this beautiful built-up A-line gown, as you can see right there. So this is what I came out with. You can see the beautiful built-up collar neckline. It has side pockets as well. The sleeve has an elastic and a belt. So you can see how it fits right here. I actually made mine a shift gown, but I'll be teaching you how to make it an A-line or a shift gown if you want. So you can see how this dress sits on me, especially the collar, the sleeve with elastic and all that. So if this is what you want to learn in this class, I will encourage you to stay till the end of this tutorial to learn how I constructed and made this built up collar neckline. So the first thing we are going to do now is to draft our built up collar neckline. So I'm going to draft the back pattern piece first, starting from the shoulder to the chest line. So I marked on the shoulder my shoulder divide by 2. So my shoulder divide by 2, I marked it on the shoulder line and on the chest line. Then I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder drop. My neck width, I used 3.5 inches for my neck width. So if you're on a bigger size, please use 4 inches for it. So I connected my straight line to the chest line. My bust circumference divided by 4, I marked it and got the midpoint of my armhole and came in by 0.5 inch and connected, and I'm going to finish up my armhole line. So the neck depth is 1 inch for the back, and I connected the neck depth, as you can see, 3.5 by 1 inch for the back. Then you are going to measure what you have on that neckline. I have 4 inches and I took note of it. So that is why we have to draft the back before the front, because of that 4 inches neckline we measured. So for the front, you are going to measure 5 inches first. Then that is your shoulder line. You now mark your chest line. And then I'll place my tape and measure my under bust. I added 1.5 inch to my under bust. So whatever your under bust is, add 1.5 inch. So for me, I use 15.5 below my under bust. So on the shoulder line, I'm going to mark 3.5 inches as my neckline, and I'll mark it in all the lines on the chest line and on the below the under bust to make a straight line. So next, my neckline depth is 3 inches for the front. I connected it to the 3.5 inches width. Then I made a slanted line for my built-up neckline and measured the 4 inches on it. Then I made a perpendicular line which is 90 degrees, and I'm going to measure my collar width. So my collar width is 2.5 inches at that point, and the depth of the neckline I use is 8 inches. So I'm going to connect that 8 inches to my collar width of 2.5 inches. So you can see how I'm shifting my ruler to be sure it gives me what I want at that point. But I just thought of making my collar width 2 inches because the 2.5 inches was big. So I later adjusted it to 2 inches. And I'm going to use a broken line to show the difference between the first one and the second one. So now this is what we need for this tutorial. So but I later thought of finishing the drafting of the armhole because of the kind of fabric I'm using. So the fabric I'm going to use is Duchess, and it actually wobbles. So on the shoulder line, I measured my shoulder divide by 2 on the shoulder line and on the chest line, and came down by 1 inch and connected my armhole line. I got the midpoint of my armhole line and came in by 0.75, and my bust divide by 4, I marked it on the chest line and completed my armhole. So this is what I want, and I want to cut it out. So I want you to watch the way I'm cutting it out, and that is what we are going to use to work for this project. So you can see how I'm cutting it out. So make sure you watch this part very well, because that is the main purpose of this tutorial. If you miss it, it will be difficult for you to follow up. So I have cut out my patterns, and this is how it's going to sit on the neckline. So my fabric is Duchess, and I use 3 yards, but this 3 yards is not for everybody. So if you're on a plus size, please, you are going to use 4 or 4.5 yards, and the way you are going to fold it will not be the same with the 3 yards. So here is the yardage part, and this is the length part. The length of my Duchess came at 62 inches. So I'm going to fold the 62 inches length into 2. So I have 31 inches when I fold it. Then if I fold it again, I will have 15.5 inches. So I thought of using 3 yards, so it will be enough. It will be, I can manage my fabric. Okay. So if your hip is bigger, you will not use 3 yards. After folding my fabric, I started to pin the Duchess fabric, because Duchess fabric can move a lot. So make sure you secure it with your pins very well before you proceed to the cutting of this fabric. So you can see I'm done arranging it. The next thing I want to do is to start pinning. So I'm going to pin all around the fabric part I folded, so everything stays in place before I start my drafting. So now I'm going to make a border line. My border line is 1 inch, and then from that border line now I'm going to take my chest line at 9 inches. Then I took my waistline at 17 inches. I took my hip line at 29 inches. So I'm going to highlight those lines, my chest line, my waistline, and the hip line accordingly. So after highlighting the hip line, I have to shift my fabric and fold the rest of it, so I'll be able to cut out my length. So I place my tape on the hip line, and I'm cutting out the length of this fabric. So the length of my fabric, I use 64 inches length. So you can go ahead and use your own desired length. So mine is 64 inches. My hemming allowance is inclusive too. So I'm going to cut out the rest of the fabric and set them aside for the sewing of the sleeve and the rest of it. So after cutting, we'll now start the drafting. So now I'm going to bring back the back piece, and I'm going to lay the back piece, making sure it aligns on the chest line and on the center back. So I will use the back piece right now as a guide to draft both the front and the back. So you can see how I'm securing it with my pin, making sure it is aligning on the chest line and on the center back. So now I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowances. I'm adding 1/2 inch from the shoulder line into the armhole. Make sure you add your stitching allowance. And then I'm going to add 1/2 inch on the shoulder seam line too. Then I'll rule the line. I'll highlight that 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to the neckline. I'm going to also add 1/2 inch all around and highlight the line. So these are the parts I'm going to cut out. So on the chest line, you are going to mark your bust circumference, divide by 4, add 2 inches to it for ease and for seam allowance. On the waist, you mark your waist, divide by 4, add 2.5 inches for ease and for seam allowance. And on the hip line, you mark your hip, divide by 4, and add 3 inches for ease and for seam allowance. Now I'm going to connect from the chest line to the waistline with my pattern ruler. So you go ahead and connect, and then connect from the waist to the hip line. So at this point, if you want to make an A-line gown, it means you are going to take this line to nothing. So but unfortunately I used 3 yards, so and my hip is 48, divide by 4, I got 12 inches. So I only had 3 inches to add at that point. So if you're on a bigger size and you have a bigger hip, you will use 4.5 inches. I keep repeating it, 4.5 yards, sorry. So you add about 7 inches to make an A line. So now I'm going to cut out this piece. So you can see how I'm going about the cutting. So I'm going to cut it following all the chalk lines I made. So I'm cutting both front and back accordingly. So after cutting, I took off my pattern and then I separated the front piece from the back piece. So the inner piece is going to serve as my back piece right now, while the upper piece is going to be the front piece, and we are going to work on the built up neckline using the upper part. So I've arranged the upper piece and secured it with my pins accordingly. So don't forget to make your notch for your pockets. I actually forgot to make it before I removed the inner part. So I came down by 2 inches for my pocket. Then my pocket opening is 7 inches. And I'm going to make notches on those lines I marked accordingly. So that is where my pocket is going to sit. So now we are going to construct the built up neckline. So you have to ensure, you have to cut out this piece. We don't need this piece anymore. So ensure that this piece lies on the chest line. Make sure it lies on the chest line. So you secure it with your pin, making sure it lies accordingly. And on the center front, the straight part has to be on the folded part, and the neckline, you also see the gap on the neckline. So just watch this video very well and see what I did. So I'm going to trace the line of this pepper on the fabric. I'm going to trace it and remove the pepper. Then I'm going to add my seam allowances inwards. I'm adding half inch inwards for my seam allowance. Half inch, like that. So after I'm done adding the half inch, I highlighted the half inch because we are going to follow the chalk line and cut out the half inch we added. That is what we are going to use to seam our built up collar. So I'll cut it on the chalk line, as you can see right here. And then once I cut it out completely, I'm going to make a notch at the 4 corner. So at that 4 corner piece part, please make a diagonal notch to it. So I just chalk that diagonal notch to show you how I'm going to cut it out. So just 0.5 inch to enable you sew the built up neckline. So now I brought my fabric right now and I hasted it, placed it on fold. So you can see me making sure I pin the folded part of this built up neckline on the folded part of the fabric. Relax it very well so I'll be able to cut out my neckline. So I added half an inch starting from the down part. I added it to the size too, half an inch. That is what I added all through. So when adding the half an inch to the front piece, I want you to pay attention to how I added it. So on the shoulder line, I added half an inch. So on the neckline, I added half an inch. But coming towards the end, the half an inch was not enough. So I just cut it off where it reaches and now open the folded part to the 8 inches point. So that is how to go about the cutting of this collar. So here you can see I made a notch at the shoulder. Don't forget to make this notch. We'll be using it for our stitching. So I took off my pins and then I cut 2 pieces. So you have to cut 2 pieces of this. So now I'm going to, this is what I got, but we are going to sew the shoulder of them together. So this is how I stitch the shoulder at half an inch. I first secure with my pin and then I went over to the sewing machine to stitch the shoulder piece at half an inch after pinning. So this is what I got after I'm done sewing, and I also gave it a good press. So I'm going to lay the collar right side to right side, match them right side to right side, secure with your pin at that part, at the center back. Then start aligning the collar. You can see the part I'm aligning and pinning, and that is the part I'm going to stitch once I get to the machine right now. So I want to show you the part you are going to stitch. After pinning, I want to chalk that part so you see where I'm going to stitch. So on that point, I'm going to chalk. You can see how I made the V. So that is how you are going to chalk, but everything has to be at half an inch all around. So I'll go over to my machine now. I'm going to stitch. So I'm done stitching, and I'm going to make a notch at the center, but don't cut off the stitches. Just be very careful while you do that. Then I'm going to flip all my seams to be part of the lining and top stitch. Don't forget to top stitch and give it a good press. So this is what I came out with after I'm done top stitching and gave it a good press. I iron it nicely. So now we are going to match the lining and the fabric together, because we want to attach this collar to the dress. So now I'm going to bring the dress. We'll first sew the neckline of this dress first. The shoulder seam lines of the back. This is the back piece. I'll bring the front piece, lay them right side to right side. So I'll go over to the machine to stitch the shoulder at half an inch. So after stitching, I gave it a good press too. So I'm going to lay it to the right side, and then we'll bring in the collar. So this is how the collar is going to sit normally. This is how it should sit normally. So I will now sit it and then turn it to the part I notched and secure it to the shoulder seam. So I'll match this part on the shoulder seam and turn it around and match the other shoulder seam. Then from that point, I'm going to secure all the center back with the fabric. The collar center back, I'll match everywhere at the back with my pins. So after that, I will align only one side, because you cannot align the both of them together for the front. So I make sure I align it. So I pinned and pinned until I got to the notch. So once you get to the notch, you will see an excess of half an inch after stitching. So that is very normal, because the half an inch, we'll use it to sew the lower piece. So I'm done sewing, and this is what I got. So you can see the lower piece is still open. So I'll flip my fabric to the wrong side and pick the lower fabric and the lower collar. So with that notch, it will be very easy for you to sew. So when you go to sew, you understand what I'm talking about. So I'll secure with my pin accordingly. So make sure you take your time on this part, so you'll be able to get that squared edge very well. So I'll stitch at half an inch. So this is what I got after stitching, and I gave it a good press. So now the dress is ready. So the next thing we are going to do now is to sew our pocket. So I'm going to cut out my pocket, and this is how I do that. I know you have your own method of cutting your pocket, but this is my own method. So I'll just place my hands like that, and my pocket opening is 7 inches. So I'll just trace it out and cut. So I am going to cut this. This is just 2 pieces for one pocket, but later I placed it on another fabric to complete the cutting. So make sure you slant your hand very well, so by the time you cut out the pocket, you'll be able to place it to sew it to relax very well. So you can see I'm cutting out the pocket right now. That is the second part, or the left side. So now the pocket is ready. I'll bring in my fabric and place the pocket on the notches I made. So I have 4 pieces right here. So I'm placing it right side to right side for each of the fabric. So I'm securing it with my pin from the part I notched to the other part I notched. And I'll do the same for the other side. Make sure it lays right side to right side. So after that, I'm going to stitch at 1/2 inch for both of them. So here I'm done stitching. Next is to lay my fabric together. So I want to show you how I'm going to stitch from the armhole. I'm going to stitch from the armhole at 1 inch. So I'll stitch 1 inch from there. Once I get to the pocket, I'll now go in by 1/2 inch. I'll stitch 1/2 inch for the pocket and 1 inch on the side. I'll come out and continue stitching 1 inch till I get to the hem. So here the dress is ready. So for the sleeve, measure your sleeve. You know we added ease to it, so you have to measure this sleeve to be sure it corresponds with your pattern. So the pattern is a basic bodice pattern, but I just added ease to it. The ease I added is on the armhole, 1 inch, and I also added on the hemline. So the length of my sleeve is 22 inches, and I expanded it because of the elastic on the hem by 8 more inches. That is 4 on one side and 4 on the other side. So I'm done cutting out my sleeve, and I made notches on the sleeve grain line. So now I'm going to fold the elastic piece. So my elastic length is 8 inches. So I'll use my safety pin and pass it through my elastic casing. So as I'm passing it through, I also stitched on this part so it does not slip in. So I'll stitch on that part. So the elastic is ready. The sleeve with the elastic is ready right now. So the next is the belt. So the belt that was attached to it, the length is 31 inches. And then the width is 5 inches, and I have 2 pieces of it. So I'll just go ahead and fold it into 2 and stitch with 1/2 inch. So I'm going to close up the 2 ends, but at the center I will leave a little open to turn it around. So I'm done stitching the both of them, so I'm going to turn it from the part I left open. So I will use my screwdriver to finish it up. So the open part of it, the part I am turning it from will be open, but I also turn it around and stitched. So this is how I turned it around and stitched till I can no longer stitch. So here the belt is ready. I folded it into 2, and I'm going to attach it to the sleeve at the hem piece. So this is how I attached it. Make sure it's inwards. Secure it inwards, okay? Fold the belt and secure it inwards. Then put it in and stitch at 1/2 inch on top of it. So that was how I stitched it. So this is what I got for this beautiful sleeve. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach it to the dress right now. So I'm going to pick up the one that should be for the front piece and attach it to the front piece of the armhole. So this is how it's going to fit. So I turn my fabric armhole the other way and insert my sleeve. So now I'm going to mark the shoulder seam lines and the armhole together, and I'm going to run my stitches around. So my dress is ready. That will come to the end of this tutorial. I believe this class was helpful to you. Please don't forget to subscribe to Simbright Fashion Academy YouTube channel and turn on your notification bell. Bye.